You're live.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Free Assange Vigil week 62. This is our fifth live stream of the first week of the second round of Julian Assange's extraordinary rendition and show trial. My name is Steve Poikinen. I may be joined by both Andrew Smith and Taylor Hudak at some point, but Andrew's driving and Taylor's in London. So I am still here in DC, and we're going to hop right into it. This should be a lot of fun. Before I introduce the guests for today, let me run through the numbers, though. Today marks 3,566 days of illegal and arbitrary detention for Julian Assange, 520 days since the WikiLeaks founder was trafficked from the Ecuadorian embassy after being sold to the United Kingdom for a $4.2 billion IMF loan. Julian was rearrested as soon as he got into court on Monday, which means the Department of Justice has a additional 55 days where they can tack on additional charges due to the rearrest under the superseding indictment. Monday will kick off day 6 of the rendition hearing. There's some asterisks next to that, which we will certainly get into. It has been 1,198 days of incarceration in federal custody for Reality Winner. The bright side is that for the last 179 days, Chelsea Manning has been a free human being, and she streams on Twitch from 7 to 11 Thursday to Sunday. I'm pretty sure I got that right. So please welcome to the Free Assange Vigil. For the first time, we got a brand new guest. I'm really excited about this. Ladies and gentlemen, the frustratingly handsome Richard Medhurst. How are you?
Hey there, it's good to be here. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm going fucking nuts, my friend. I'm sleep deprived and angry and slightly crazy, although I started out that way. So that's fairly expected. But overall it has been just a cartoonish week in a series of what looks like overly intentional tech glitches, and you have done some incredible coverage, just summarizing it in a way that's easily digestible. It's broken down where even if people are unfamiliar with this case, they can get on board and understand what's going on. And that's something that we have a harder time doing because we're living this, and there's so much background into it, and there's so many things, like so many angles of attack you can approach it with, that we sometimes get lost in the history of it or the explanation of it. So I appreciate your coverage on this very much, man.
Thank you.
Let's jump into it a little bit, and I think we should work backwards because of the way that the week has worked out. So there of course was no hearing yesterday, and the reason that there was no hearing ostensibly is because there was a junior prosecutor whose husband magically developed COVID-like symptoms right around the time that the lead prosecutor, James Lewis, was drowning in his own flop sweat, trying to attack these witnesses. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on that particular moment where James Lewis was like, well, I don't have my charger and my laptop's gonna die, and I never made it back to my house to get my paperwork, and I might be covered in cocaine and hooker blood, but I'm a little bit unprepared for the trial this morning. Let's go ahead and kick it over. What are your thoughts on all that?
This is obscene. It's absolutely preposterous. I mean, this is one of the most high profile extradition hearings and trials of the century, arguably, and the prosecution are acting like a bunch of incompetent buffoons, and that's putting it mildly. You know, that if you omit their nefarious tactics. But this whole extradition hearing was postponed from February until now, until September, because of COVID. You would think that the first thing they would do before resuming court was, would test people for COVID. No, nothing to do with the trial, just out of common sense. Even if we were talking about a regular office or any kind of domain where people would be reconvening after such a long lockdown. I mean, okay, we can argue about how terrible the UK lockdown arguably was, but just regardless, out of common sense, you would test people for this before resuming court. And this callous disregard for people's health, for Julian's health, and again, we can go into this going back years. This didn't just start now, but the grueling torture that they put Julian Assange through, physically, mentally. I mean, what about him? If it's not safe to reconvene in court until Monday, it's been postponed until Monday for now, because of the clerks, or the prosecution, or the defense, or the judge, or court staff contracting COVID and a potential outbreak. I mean, why is it safe for Julian then? Already, as it is in Belmarsh prison, you've had one inmate who's died of COVID, and I mean, those conditions are abysmal already.
Guards and just staff at Belmarsh that self-quarantined for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks because of this. Yet when they would let prisoners into the exercise yard for like the 1/2 hour a day that they got to walk around the yard, all the prisoners are together. It is an exercise in the state flexing its cruelest muscles, and we were talking to Kevin Gustola, and he was like, there's this image that I have of just Baratzer in the court and Julian in the fishbowl, and then there's just monitors that appear with the defense and the prosecution on either side of the judge, and that is a perfect encapsulation of just what a dystopian shit show this more or less broad daylight kidnapping of a journalist and publisher has become. Which, by the way, if anyone's a graphic artist, please come up with that image and send it to me and the good Kevin, because we'll put that shit on a shirt.
It's really dystopian, and their callous disregard for his health. He has underlying breathing problems, as far as my understanding goes, and just out of common sense, once again, it's just basic precautionary sense to make sure that you don't needlessly expose people to this disease, especially when they're confined into such a small area in a maximum security prison. But nonetheless, they've neglected his health in Belmarsh prison, and now they're carting him off to the Old Bailey. This is it's done on purpose. Make no mistake. I mean, I don't know, if they're trying to kill him or not just yet. I think they want to try and establish a legal precedent first, so that they can go after future journalists too. But nonetheless, that doesn't mean that Julian Assange is being treated even remotely in a humane manner at all. And the 2 physicians that visited him, along with the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, called for his immediate release. They said that this man has been undergoing extensive psychological and physical torture for years when he was holed up in the embassy, arbitrarily arrested, essentially, holed up in there. His living conditions, or rather conditions of confinement inside of Belmarsh prison, this is beyond inhumane. And, I always bring up the case of Abu Qatada, because I don't know if many people were paying attention to this. This is like 10 years ago now, almost. And he was also in Belmarsh prison. This is a Jordanian cleric. And even he was treated more humanely. Like, this terrorist who has links to Al-Qaeda was given house arrest. Yet Julian Assange, who is a journalist, he's not allowed house arrest. He's not allowed more somewhat humane conditions. Well, really, you have to think of this. It's
perfectly
insane.
Clear about that. If you've got ties to Al-Qaeda, you are more or less directly in the CIA's pocket.
Right.
Assange is not. So there's an imbalance of favor that comes with your overall treatment.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. The first time that Julian was put in jail for a short amount of time, they had been putting metal shavings into his food, which cracked a tooth. He had an abscess, and that was just one little way to like throw an elbow at him, kick him while he was down. They managed to do a number of these things to him while they were there. They limited his contact with his lawyers for 6 months. He wasn't able to see them. When they finally gave him a computer so he could access the materials used in his own defense, which he had not been able to do, they fucking glued the keys down.
The keys, right? Insane. You know, they treat him like worse than a terrorist. Truly, you know, even his father on the first day of the trial very accurately pointed out that people at the International Criminal Court get to sit at the bar table with their lawyers. They are allowed access to the court materials and defense materials. You know, Julian Assange, he has guards standing on either side of this bulletproof cage, essentially, right? This glass cage. And he can't even communicate directly with his lawyers. I mean, this is what really shocks me, and this is saying something. What shocks me more than this trial itself and the inhumanity is the lack of public outcry. Now, you know, granted, there's a lot of us out here making the case for Assange and trying to raise awareness, but I don't think there's nowhere near enough outrage. I mean, people should be losing their shit over this. This is fucking nuts what's happening to him. And what's especially frightening is the lack of concern and alarm from other journalists, right? You know, I mean, yesterday you had Glenn Greenwald, for example, going on Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is covering this shit. Where's all the other networks? I mean, even in independent media, you don't have everyone covering this, you know? Who's next on the chopping block?
I'm so glad you brought that up. One of the things I think that has been a stumbling block for Action for Assange as an organization is that we're going to criticize independent media. We're going to try to hold independent media accountable for what they cover and what they don't cover. And we've been very vocal about that. But it's not that we're like, why aren't you talking to us? It's why aren't you talking about this?
Right, exactly.
And for Tucker Carlson, who is inarguably a neocon and you know what, just a tool of empire in so many different ways, for him to be able to recognize this and for him to be able to even give Greenwald 3 minutes. That's all he gave him.
Right.
3 minutes. But those 3 minutes contained more valid information then I'm going to assume the rest of the day on Fox's programming, or certainly Tucker's show, but also, you know, those 3 minutes with Glenn Greenwald on Fox News on Tucker Carlson's show were more coverage than Julian Assange got in like 95% of independent media. And that is a massive shame, because who the fuck do you think they're going to come after first? Tucker or you, Kyle Kulinski, or you, Jamarl Thomas, or you, Tim Black, or who, you know, like who's going
exactly?
Because it's not
exactly. Dude, you know, just a few months back, they demonetized me on YouTube all of a sudden. You know, this was during the week when Israel were set to annex the, you know, this undergo this Trump peace deal, and or rather Kushner, you know, it's such a mess, right? The Jared Kushner one from January, and then they had their own annexation plan, which didn't really mesh 100% with what Washington wanted. Anyway, this was in the beginning of July, and so I was covering their annexation or supposed planned annexation, and all of a sudden I got demonetized, right? For no reason. And thank God, you know, due to public outcry on Twitter, they reinstated my channel. But as you just pointed out, we're the first people that are on the chopping block, especially independent media, you know, journalists as a whole, but especially independent media who don't have the backing of corporations and you know, all these large news outlets. But man, for Tucker Carlson, who can't even say kilograms properly, you know, it says kilograms, to be able to cover Assange. I mean, what the fuck is your excuse? Like, this is not just embarrassing. This is willful ignorance. They know damn well what's going on. They're not fucking stupid. They know what Julian Assange is going through. They know damn well that he's on trial right now. They're not fucking dumb. They're on Twitter. They know what's going on in the news. They see us. And for them to not talk about this is very indicative. And it's an indictment upon themselves. It's an indictment upon them. You know, this is really a failure, an abject failure on their part. And you would think that independent media, who are not, well, you know, at least on paper, most of them are not beholden to any corporate donors, and should not be towing the line of the establishment and the national security state, for them, they should be able to cover this easily. So what's the explanation here? It makes no sense to me. And it's just really disappointing, honestly. And for me, even if you're not a journalist, I think that anyone who understands, if you break down what's happening to Assange, they will be outraged. This is not something exclusive to journalists, just as the First Amendment is not something exclusive to journalists. People sometimes make this mistake thinking that, it only covers journalists, or it covers everyone except journalists. No. This is a blanket issue upon the sovereignty of the UK. This is Uncle Sam, sticking their hand, reaching a hand all the way into the UK's courts, violating Australian sovereignty as well. Julian's, free rights as an Australian citizen. UK courts are being made a mockery of, and they're violating EU law as well. I know the UK is set to terminate the transition period on 31st of December this year, but nonetheless, they're still technically in the EU. And when they jailed Assange, the UK was still in the EU. And, under any kind of legal agreements and international norms, there's no way you can look at Julian Assange's persecution and deem it to have any legal basis whatsoever. I mean, I covered this in the open letter from Lawyers for Assange. Yeah. They outlined this very eloquently, that, you look at EU law, you look at Article 3 of the European Charter of Human Rights, the right to not being tortured, essentially, and Article 6, the right to a fair trial. I might have inverted those, but nonetheless, this is a violation of the European Charter of Human Rights. Once again, let me remind you, Abu Qatada, this Jordanian cleric, his extradition was blocked thanks to the European Court of Human Rights. So it saved him until they drew up an extradition treaty for him. If you look at the UK and US extradition treaty from 2003, it clearly blocks and bans any kind of political trial. So you cannot extradite someone for them to go and face a political trial in the US and vice versa in the UK. And, just the fact that Julian Assange is an Australian citizen in the UK. What the hell is he doing being charged under US law? They want to charge Julian Assange under US law while also denying him any privileges and rights under US law. Mike Pompeo has come out and said multiple times, as have many people in the Trump administration, that Julian Assange has no First Amendment rights. That's what they say. Okay, so if he has no First Amendment rights because he's sitting all the way in London, then why the hell are you prosecuting him under US law if he's sitting all the way in London? Which one is it?
It is Garland Nixon called it an arbitrary application of law. Yeah. And it is. It's like it's cafeteria or buffet style approach to this, where, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and put some of this on his plate. And sure, it's a steaming pile of shit. And these are, 15-day-old collard greens that sat in the jar, like on the porch when it's the most humid. Yeah. But that's what you get. And no, you actually don't get any of the good casserole, and you don't get any of the meat, which would be the First Amendment in this case. It is so fucking it's so frustrating. It's just infuriating, man.
Yeah. And when you're seeing what's taking place in the trial in court right now during this extradition hearing, it's so amusing because it's like the prosecution, they can't make up their minds whether they want to prosecute Julian Assange as a journalist who broke the law, or he's not a journalist and therefore he broke the law. Like, which one is it? They can't even make up their minds with their line of questioning, because, on one hand, they'll say that, even if you do consider him a journalist, he still committed cyber crimes when he allegedly helped Chelsea Manning hack into these documents, which is ludicrous. They can't even prove that. And as we saw from these various statements, I believe, if I recall correctly, this was Professor Paul Rogers who said that there's nothing wrong with a source and publisher collaborating. I mean, actually, every single one of the expert witnesses has said that so far, which shows you just how clear cut this issue is. It's not even up for debate. You look at Yeah.
Real quick, Trevor Tim went into detail about
Right.
the secure drop and
Yeah.
how secure drop works, and the fact that there are over 80 news outlets currently using a form of secure drop. So
Exactly.
it's not the prosecution is kind of at a crossroads because they need to hammer home their point, which is fabricated, that Julian Assange isn't a journalist. They need to hammer that home while at the same time making sure that every other news outlet, every other publishing outlet, every other investigative journalist is fully aware that they may be next, that they're subject to this. And it brings up, I got a couple of questions for you real quick. First of all, like, where are you getting your live, like the live feed from? Did you actually get on the video cloud platform, or are you going from a handful of the people who are live tweeting?
Okay, so the thing is, if you recall, on the first day of the trial, they revoked access to like 40 different people, at least 40 different people, among them Amnesty International and Penn Norway. So, unfortunately, I wasn't able to get in on the live feed. They've been stonewalling all kinds of NGOs, journalists, news organizations. I mean, the ones who even bothered to cover the trial. Yeah. So, that's great.
They're locking out members of parliament, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. And, just to underscore how ridiculous this is, being half English, the Old Bailey is traditionally a public court. You can come and sit in the gallery and watch what's going on. So just by definition, the public should have the right to watch this trial. Okay. But moreover, even during COVID, when you have to make accommodations and try to rectify the fact that people can't convene in large numbers, and we're prevented from doing that because of the disease, and we want to prevent outbreaks, so let's be responsible here. No, even despite that, they're trying to make damn sure that this thing is not available to the members of the public and even journalists and NGOs, so nobody can monitor what's going on and nobody can expose what's going on, because were people to find out what's really happening to Julian, they would be rightfully outraged. And it's just an absolute mockery of any kind of semblance of justice, of transparency, accountability. And, Uncle Sam has completely taken over this entire court system. I mean, not to say that the Crown Prosecution Service was exactly some kind of holy, perfect institution before, but if you had any kind of illusions about some kind of democracy or justice being at play here, well, make no mistake, that's been completely obliterated. And it's just really indicative of how they of their hypocrisy, because they talk about, the UK and the US being these beacons of justice and democracy, and they're civilized societies, and look what they're doing here. They're having a secret trial, in broad daylight. Yeah, just to juxtapose that. But they're holding a secret trial, essentially.
Political prisoner who is a journalist and publisher who has won multiple awards from multiple countries for the accurate information that they published. And
exactly.
Totally unrelated. But the Old Bailey was the first building that got blown up in V for Vendetta. I'm going to put that out there. Has nothing to do with today's broadcast. Just a side note because we watched it here at the DC house the other night. Mostly because we're living in the real-time fucking prequel. So a refresher there. No, you're so right. It is it's a combination of I guess long-term UK empirical tendencies in their courtroom that are now merging with what is essentially the State Department acting as the UK's Ministry of Justice. We've been referring to Vanessa Baraitser as the concierge for the US State Department because she's been showing up with these prepared statements. And
she's horrible.
The conclusions in her mind have already been drawn, and she needs the prosecution and defense to go through the motions to make it appear that, at least the rules are being adhered to sometimes when she feels like it. But as soon as they're done talking, she just looks down and reads off a piece of paper. Like she doesn't even go through the motions of pretending to deliberate in her head about it.
Yeah, not at all. It's like she had to be reminded that the prosecution went over the time limit. Yeah, like who's the fucking judge who's running the show here? You can do your job, asshole, or what? She's already made up her mind on whose side she is. She's working for them. There's been I think you might have seen this a report about the conflict of interest, that's putting it mildly, regarding her husband, right? Yeah. So, but just without even touching on that, just based on her performance, based on her behavior in the courtroom, she's clearly allowing the prosecution to run wild. I mean, Julian Assange was rearrested on the morning of the trial. I don't know anyone on this planet who gets arrested and then whisked away to court immediately and is given no time to prepare a defense. Now, granted, you can play devil's advocate here and tell me that, oh, well, the new indictment had no new charges in it, no new counts. That's not the point. They're not relying on adding new counts to screw over Julian Assange and, provide more weight to this indictment. What they've relied on is all this spam and this nonsense and this quote unquote narrative that they've packed in there, trying to enlarge in the scope of the indictment and make it seem like Julian Assange is some evil criminal mastermind genius who's been conspiring, with all these hacker groups. And even though there's no evidence for that, and it's obscene. And she gave him no time to prepare, right? She just they asked to adjourn. So they asked for her to throw out this conduct. They refer to it legally as conduct. And she refused. And moreover, she refused to allocate them a few more months' time for the hearing to be adjourned until January for Julian to prepare defense. But, she had no problem with the U.S. submitting a superseding indictment past the deadline. Oh, that's totally fine. And,
Not just
they had
past
10
the
fucking
deadline,
years.
but 2 days after the defense had already submitted the skeleton arguments that would form the basis of this hearing right now.
How convenient,
While we're talking about the superseding indictment, it's really important to point out that the testimony that the Department of Justice is relying on inside of the superseding indictment comes from not one but two paid FBI informants,
right.
One of whom
Sabu is one of them, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, and that's Sabu was his handle. It was Anonymous Abu before it was Anonymous Sabu, and then just Sabu. We've had a couple of old school anons on the show here before that broke all this down for us. And in fact, the weekend after the superseding indictment was released, not to the British courts, not to Julian's defense team, but to the fucking media in the U.S.
Because, you get to find out at the same time as the media. How nice,
and you described it just perfectly when you brought it up. It reads almost like a bad spy novel, and it's not a court document. It's a narrative. It's something it's talking points for the media to run with, and that's why it was released to him before it was released to the court. But what it does, relying on the testimony of Sabu, of Hector Monsignor, who was a paid fucking rat before LulzSec was formed, before these hacks took place, it opens an avenue for Julian's defense team to go, why aren't we charging the FBI for this? Since technically they're the ones that hacked Stratfor, and they're the ones that hacked Sony, and they're the ones that hacked HB Gary. Why aren't we shining a light on what the FBI did? Because we have proof that Sabu was already working for them before he reached out to Jeremy Hammond and said, hey, do you want to be on the team?
That's a great question. And not only that, but besides these paid informants, if I recall correctly, several of the people listed in the superseding indictment, right? They were already convicted in Southwark, right? They were already convicted in 2013. And this begs the question if, hold on a second, if you already held a trial and you already went through the motions of this case and explored every avenue and let justice, quote unquote, justice run its course, then technically, if Julian Assange was conspiring with these people, why wasn't he convicted back in 2013?
Exactly. And then
this should be a done deal already.
And look, I mean, we know from Chelsea Manning's court martial that not only they couldn't prove that a single individual was harmed because of any of these leaks, but we also know that this idea that Julian told Chelsea Manning to hack into this computer to get Cablegate or to get the Iraq war logs is absolutely bullshit, because in the court martial it came out that all of that information, including the collateral murder video, was just sitting on the fucking server, that you didn't need a username or password to access.
There we go. Right. I remember that. I remember that very distinctly. And once again, I mean, operational security failure on behalf of the U.S. military and intelligence agencies is not the fault of journalists. Okay, that's their fault. That's their problem. Moreover, just to play devil's advocate here, even if supposedly you could actually prove that this happened, that Julian Assange allegedly encouraged or worked with Chelsea Manning to get these documents, as we heard in the testimonies from all these expert witnesses, and I believe this was Trevor Timm who pointed this out, there's nothing wrong with that. This is a common occurrence. This is a daily occurrence. He himself on his Twitter has said, if you have XYZ documents, I can't remember which specific matter he was referring to, but he said that on his own Twitter, he has posted asking for CIA documents. There's nothing wrong with soliciting classified documents. It's a common, it's protected under free speech. And moreover, this is a common occurrence to have source and publisher working together. So even if you're going to play devil's advocate and say that they technically conspired together, again, everyone does this. The New York Times did this with Daniel Ellsberg for the Pentagon Papers. Why isn't anyone in jail for that? Right?
Well, they tried to put Ellsberg in jail for that.
They tried, right? But they couldn't, you see, and that's the point. If we've already established this precedent, then why the hell are we dealing with this issue again with Assange?
One of my favorite lines from Trevor Timm's testimony and his questioning was when Lewis was like, well, doesn't everything that you're saying fly in the face of the rule of law and blah, blah, blah? And he's like, yeah, it does. That's why I'm saying it shouldn't go forward. Yeah, like the last thing a prosecutor ever wants to hear on direct questioning when he poses a question to the defense's witness is, I'm really glad you asked about that. And
that was hilarious, honestly.
Oh, no fucking wonder the guy called in sick the next day and had to like postpone for the next. If you're getting dog walked all over the courtroom by multiple witnesses, it's time to.
He got schooled. Trevor Timm was definitely the most solid witness up until this point, because once again, during another interaction in the trial, he asked him, what makes you an authority on U.S. law? Are you a lawyer? And he's like, yes, I raised the bar in 2008. God, that was embarrassing. So, Trevor Timm is not only a co-founder of the Freedom of Press Foundation and a well-seasoned veteran of journalism, but also a lawyer. So there's no way you could try to run circles around him. Quite the contrary, he's the one who ran circles around the prosecution, around Lewis QC, and he didn't fall victim to this line of questioning that Lewis has tried to undertake with almost every expert witness, where he tries to lead them down this path and pose these yes and no questions and gets mad and pissy when they don't answer in short bursts and actually give him responses. And moreover, he's been undertaking this consistent, this repetitive tactic where he tries to discredit every expert witness and portray them as being biased, right? So instead of actually addressing the arguments and trying to prove culpability, which he cannot do because these expert witnesses are all towing the same line, and correctly so, that what Julian Assange did is completely innocent and normal, he has to go after their character and character assassinate them and try to smear them, because that's the only thing he can possibly do. There is no legal basis to actually prosecute Julian Assange under. And so he has to go after the character of these expert witnesses and try to portray them as being here on behalf of Julian Assange, which is completely ridiculous. I mean, it's really, really a show trial, a pony show, whatever you want to call it. Just disgusting.
We had a French gentleman named Victor Dedage on a couple of months ago. He writes for an outlet called Le Grand Soir, and he told us to stop using the language of empire when we talk about this case, that it's not an extradition. Julian Assange isn't even a U.S. citizen. What it is an extraordinary rendition. It's a broad daylight kidnapping. It's a violation of multiple national laws, international laws.
Yeah, really.
And it is what it amounts to, it more or less, in my opinion at least, wandering away from Victor's lecture here, and we're going into mine now. What it is the last desperate gasp of authoritarian control that a dying empire can try to accomplish in its sundown years of doing everything possible to maintain the illusion that they're ultimately in control. And that's why we need more people talking about this. That's why I'm so very glad that you are. That's why we're in DC and we're out in the streets, 6 if not 7 days a week, and trying to put our actions out there so that people can see that there are people willing to travel to give a fuck about free speech, investigative journalism, and saving the life of a perfectly innocent human being. Definitely.
And, I just want to bring up another point, because speaking of extradition, or rather this is broad daylight kidnapping, I hope it's not lost on anyone that when it came to Abu Qatada, this Jordanian cleric, his extradition was blocked because they feared that if he were to be extradited to Jordan to face terrorism charges for, I think, 2 plots, one from 1999 and another one, I think, from 2001, that he would be found guilty because the charges being brought against him were obtained under torture. Okay. And so this is clearly forbidden under the European Charter of Human Rights. And, it violates the principle of a right to a fair trial. And there was also the fear that he himself might be tortured were he to be rendered to the Jordanian authorities. And so just to put this into context, what ended up happening is the UK ended up writing a brand new extradition treaty with Jordan just for the sake of making sure that this terrorist would not be facing trial using evidence obtained under torture, and that he himself would not be tortured. And guess what? He gets to Jordan, he's found innocent, and the guy's walking free now. Yeah. Meanwhile, Julian Assange, where it clearly says in the goddamn extradition treaty, you don't need to drop a new one. We already got one, all right, between the UK and the US. It says you can't get him into the US to face a political trial. It's very clear cut. And you have EU law saying this, and you have, just UK law, under UK law or any legal system. The fact that they spied on him in the embassy and took all of his personal effects already violates his right to a fair trial. So just under local UK law, you should throw this entire case out, not to mention the international agreements. So it's really disgusting, right? The Al-Qaeda terrorists, they get special treatment and brand new extradition treaties to protect them, and they walk free. But Julian Assange is treated like, Rudolf Hess or some fucking Nazi. It's unreal.
Yeah.
Unreal.
And the US is going to do everything in their power to make sure that none of the information that's coming out of the UC Global trial will ever find its way into Julian Assange's.
Yeah, they've been working hard at that. So I covered this yesterday, last night. I'll be posting a video in a bit, but they've been stonewalling the Spanish prosecution now. So the Spanish courts have asked the U.S. for evidence regarding which servers were having, all this stolen material, all of the webcam footage inside of the embassy. Where was this data being sent to? What are the IP addresses? Where are these servers located? So they submitted this query to the US, and the US comes back and tells them, oh, well, we want more information about this court proceeding, and if you don't answer us by, I think it was October 16th, then we're just going to assume you're not interested. Like the audacity that they have committed all these crimes against Assange and spied on him, and even plotted to kill him. I mean, this was openly being discussed between the CIA and UC Global. They were thinking of ways to poison him inside of the embassy. And now they are coming and imposing conditions on the Spanish courts as if like they have any kind of moral or legal high ground here. This is obscene. Really, it's the arrogance is truly something.
We live in a fucking cartoon, my friend. we do. We know from these hearings in Spain, not only do we know about the plot, assassination attempts or discussion of assassination attempts, we know that they wanted a low-level functionary at UC Global to root around in the trash can searching for a diaper.
Yeah, oh my God.
But it's not just the massive violation of legal, civil, and human rights that Julian was subjected to in this case, though. It's everyone who came to visit him as well was subject to a gross violation of their civil rights and their civil liberties by dint of showing up. And that is something that we really need, if not eventual accountability for, a very serious conversation about, just so that people are aware of how depraved these fucking demons are.
It really is absolutely staggering. You know, I really want to underscore this point that you raised because it is truly unbelievable. You know, the U.S. have consistently, repeatedly violated the diplomatic international agreements that are in place. You know, for example, if you look at Evo Morales, so they got rid of him with this CIA OAS backed coup last year. When he was flying back home, they actually grounded his plane in Vienna because they thought Edward Snowden was on board. I mean, to ground a presidential plane, you gotta have some fucking stones to do that.
You know why, though, right?
I mean,
no, I mean,
they thought Snowden was on board.
Wanted to ground that particular plane is because Julian had made sure that devices were on in the room that he was in, and they straight up trolled the U.S. government. Knew they were being surveilled and trolled the U.S. government into thinking that Snowden was going to be on Morales's plane, when in fact they had him on a completely different one. And instead of going to Ecuador via Vienna, he was going to Russia. And that's even discussed the superseding indictment, because they want to put Sarah Harrison away for that, for her role in it.
No, this is insane. And, you know, just in any country, you can't even stop low-level functionary from an embassy if they have diplomatic plates. You can't arrest them, you know, and here they are grounding a presidential plane. I mean, this blatant violation of Bolivian sovereignty, of the international diplomatic agreements that are in place. It's disgusting. And then when it comes to the Ecuadorian embassy, I mean, not only is it completely illegal, regardless if this was happening in just a random apartment, to spy on people and plot to kill them and go through their goddamn trash looking for diapers and trying to, gather materials against them to be used in some pony show secret trial. But to do that in an embassy, I mean, Jesus, they really got no goddamn respect whatsoever, even for other, foreign dignitaries and diplomatic missions. It's absolutely unprecedented, and really shows you how little respect and how much disdain they have towards other countries. You know, it's really just an empire throwing their weight around, and even the UK are, on a leash at this point.
Yeah, the UK is, the Australians are, and everyone is, basically backing into a corner or trying to climb up a tree because there's this rogue rabid dog called the CIA that has just been running around, basically acting like a fucking emperor in late stage syphilis, and pretending that they alone have the authority to make the kind of decisions that not only determine who lives and dies, but determines the future and the scope of investigative journalism on an international level. Can you speak to what kind of impact a the legal precedent that they're trying to set will have specifically in the Middle East and in Syria with trying to get accurate information out about what the U.S. is doing in that part of the world and how they're manipulating events to their favor.
Well, I mean, the thing is, as we're seeing already, and we've been seeing for the past couple of years, it's hard enough, it's taboo enough as it is to even speak about what's happening in Syria. I mean, you put Syria in your YouTube video title, you get demonetized, and they'll come after your channel and start castrating your your reach and trying to put you in a cave. And if you veer off course, right? If you diverge even slightly from the official narrative about what's happening inside of Syria and with these regime change wars and imperialist coups that are taking place, I mean, not just in Syria, but also, Bolivia, and you go against the official narrative, they'll come after you. So, they're doing that regardless. And all these big tech companies are more than willing to bend over backwards. They're essentially arms of the national security state. Make no mistake. It's pretty obvious at this point. They've started now with putting these labels under people's Twitter handles and Facebook pages, like a Russian state media or whatever. It's ridiculous. So that's one thing. Now, when it comes to this extradition hearing and Assange's trial, I mean, I think this is going to destroy any kind of semblance of journalistic freedoms, regardless. And it's already hard enough as it is. It's already difficult enough to tell the truth, to go against the official narrative. But once this happens, man, people are going to be sent away. I mean, we're talking disappeared. Okay. Julian Assange is being made an example out of, but I'm really afraid to think of what would happen afterwards. And I think it really speaks to the hypocrisy also, because we constantly hear about how all these Middle Eastern countries, all these regimes, the axis of evil, the bad countries, right? Oh, they have no journalistic freedoms, and they have no freedom of press, and everything is state media, and blah blah blah. Well, what the fuck do you call this?
Well, and
what is this?
They're never telling you that a BBC employee works for the British government. They're never telling you, it's only the quote unquote perceived enemies or the perceived bad guys on this who have to then, basically subject themselves to registering as a foreign news agent or some shit like that. And
it's insane, man.
It's so blatant. But because the U.S. is the most heavily propagandized nation on the planet, people are like, "Oh, they're keeping us safe from the Russians." Make me want to choke a motherfucker, dude.
Dude, the media in the UK and the US, especially, it's so propagandized and so controlled. I mean, to call it state media is an understatement. That's really putting it mildly. They don't put anything out. Unless it's completely towing the official narrative, that they've received on these CIA talking points on a sheet. Their sole purpose is to propagate lies and lie people into wars. They are war criminals. Truly, as Julian Assange has said himself, and I reiterate this point. There's no difference between Nicole Wallace and Joseph fucking Goebbels. These people are scum. They sit in front of a teleprompter and a camera and lie to millions, to the globe, about the most, crazy shit. They make up complete lies about WMDs. They try to justify torture and do it so callously and with absolute impunity. They're no different from Nazi propagandists. They're no different. And people should really start to view them as such. They are dangerous and they're enemies of the people. And truly, I mean that, because, if you're willing to lie people and tell them to go and to the other side of the globe and bomb the crap out of people they don't even know, and they themselves then get killed and start these wars and fuel all of this conflict. I mean, what are you other than a mass murderer at this point?
Yep, absolutely. I could not agree more. And look, this is why it's so fundamentally important that the people who are watching right now, the people in the audience, start to hold. And we've got people that do this already, but I'm just expanding this to the rest of the class who isn't fully participating. Go ahead and not just with the blue check fucking intelligentsia, but go in and really let your independent content creators know how important this is to you, because if you're in a position to donate to independent media, you by default become part of that show's production team.
Right.
And if they're not talking about the biggest fucking press freedom trial in our lifetimes, that means that they have chosen a side, and that side
Unacceptable.
Not on the side of press freedom.
No, it's unacceptable. It really is. And may I add to that? May I add one more thing, which also really annoys me and grieves me, is that it's not just that they're ignoring what's happening to Julian Assange, but another issue that I always see being ignored. I mean, what about what's happening to Palestinians, right? This has been going on for 72 fucking years. It didn't start yesterday. You have more than enough information to go off of, and they never talk about it. Like these are the most disgusting and brazen violations of human rights. I mean, just for example, if you wanted to look at what happened with George Floyd, the way that he was choked. I mean, we have clear-cut evidence that Israelis have been training U.S. police departments. They have very extensive grant programs that are tailored and catered for this. And so you can easily connect this. I mean, we're dealing with the same oppressors here, right? It's being funded by the same people. They're being trained by the same people. This is all done in cooperation. And the levels of brutality that are being committed against Palestinians are swept under the rug on a daily basis. Like you'd be hard pressed to find anyone talking about this stuff. And again, it's really an indictment upon independent media to ignore these issues, to ignore the trial of Julian Assange. This is one of the biggest, most high profile cases of the century and in the history of journalism. How could you possibly not talk about this? I mean, either you're fucking incompetent or you're complicit with the establishment and the national security state in this endeavor. And again, I'd say the same thing about ignoring the plight of Palestinians. It's also really, they're not doing their jobs, man. Put simply, they're just not doing their jobs.
Something on a personal level. I read MPP's platform, the one that they released ahead of their convention, the People's Convention. And I noted that they advocated for a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine, and my heart fucking sank, and I was shaking my head, and I'm like, my God, man, it's 2020.
That ain't happening.
If you are advocating for a two-state solution, looking at the map of expanded Israeli territory just in the last 50 years, and you still think that a two-state solution is something that is viable or meaningful, your head is so far up your ass that you're not going to be able to hear this criticism. And
exactly.
I can't remember the name of the general's kid who wrote this article about why the two-state solution is absolute bullshit. I'll try and find it and post it on Twitter later. But he broke it down in such a way that, like, he said basically anyone who's advocating for a two-state solution right now is green lighting the future and current genocide of Palestinians.
Yeah, definitely.
And I can't, like, you don't get to talk about, in my opinion, you don't get to talk about things like press freedom or investigative journalism without mentioning what is happening in the Middle East, and specifically with Israel and Palestine and with Syria. That's why I keep having Vanessa Beeley on my other show on Slow News Day. Like, her takes are as close to reality as I can find. I'd love to have you on to have that conversation too.
Definitely, I'd love to.
We're a little bit more loose on the other show, although today I'm fucking still like I'm fucking smoking on camera because I'm fucking sleep deprived, and I've been.
I don't blame you. We're all sleep deprived at this point, man. And but everything you're saying is correct. This two-state solution, it's a way to placate and stall. And Israel by default, it can only exist at the expense of Palestinians. I mean, just to bulldoze one home, just to install one illegal settlement, It's illegal since the beginning, man. I mean, we're not talking about one instance with millions of people, man. I mean, my cousin, for example, he's third generation. Why do you think his grandfather came to Syria as a refugee? Well, he came there by accident and just fell out the sky. They took his fucking land. They kicked him out. Millions of Palestinians are kicked out, and they're refugees to this day. Some of them in Jordan, some of them in Syria, some of them in Lebanon, Kuwait, and then of course the ones that are still in occupied Palestine. And you can't talk about police brutality and these endless wars and not bring up what's happening to Palestinians. I mean, you're either fucking clueless or you're complicit, and that's not acceptable. I expect better from independent media. They're not beholden to corporate donors, allegedly. So what's their excuse? Do your jobs, right? And same thing with Assange. And it's really upsetting. And I hope that we see some people waking the fuck up.
Muted, Steve.
I can't hear.
Sorry
Steve.
about that. I'd muted because
no worries.
Doing this from a porch on a somewhat populated
No
street in Washington D.C. Mostly because I want to be able to smoke cigarettes and I hate being indoors in general. But fuck, train of thought, man. It's been a long day.
So we're talking two-state solution.
We have tried to reach out to independent content creators, people who brag about how they're crowdfunded and have no ties to any corporate anything or any political anything, and they're just here to speak truth and report the news. And we directly brought this case to them and said, will you please come on to comment about it? Will you please start talking about this on your shows?
Right.
And to the credit of the people who were brutally honest about it, who said no, they were like, this is how I make my living. And I know that if I talk about it, I'll get demonetized. I'll lose subscribers. I'll lose revenue.
Who said that?
Straight the fuck up. You want to know who said that? Tim fucking Black said that. Jamal Thomas said that.
They don't want to talk about Julian Assange because they'll lose money?
Because it's their bottom line.
What the fuck is the relationship here? I'm confused.
If you put out content that has Assange's name in the title, that is going to get hidden. Not only will it get hidden and that video be demonetized, but you'll show up on YouTube's, naughty list. And then they will continue to hide your content. They will continue to make sure you don't show up as a recommended creator or recommended channel. And it's a microcosm of, the process being the punishment.
That's bullshit.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. It's absolute bullshit, but that's why we fucking named names in the past. These are people who have a significant amount of influence, who have made a deliberate choice based on their financial security to train their audience to ignore national security issues, freedom of the press issues.
If Julian Assange gets convicted, they ain't gonna have no fucking show. They ain't gonna have no fucking bottom line. So what kind of a long-term investment is that?
Fuck with you, Richie Medhurst, because you understand that shit and fucking
What kind of a long-term investment is that? They sound like they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. If they're so concerned with their bottom line, that's not how to go about it. You don't seem too smart to me. Nonetheless, it's not even about that. What about having some fucking integrity here? I mean, all the things that are worth covering are going to get you in hot water. What the fuck do you think Julian Assange is being tried for? Because he exposed, what kind of cereal they eat at the White House? No, he exposed fucking war crimes. He exposed shit that's being covered up that people needed to know.
So
he did a service for the public.
Notice how few outlets.
I'm not asking anyone to go to jail either, but at the same time, we're not asking much here just to speak up about it. This is really grasping at straws here. Like, oh, they're gonna my bottom line. Fuck your bottom line, man. You're gonna have no channel. You're gonna have no bottom line if they get through with this trial. Use your platform, do something good, man. It's for your own benefit. If you're gonna be selfish about it and just look at it from an ego point of view, it's for your own good. If you're a journalist, I can't really dumb it down anymore. Not just that it's the right thing to do regardless. Everyone should be speaking about this, but especially as a fucking journalist.
Well, and here's the thing that I think needs to happen. I think the audience the collective audience that made independent media a thing, that made these content creators, household names in circles at least, and have given them the kind of life that they wanted to get. I think the audience needs to decide whether or not they want to support journalists or they want to provide a comfortable living for a pundit. And
yeah, it's a good way of putting it.
Because you can tell who wants to be a pundit when they grow up, Kyle Kalinske, and who wants to be a journalist, Richie Medhurst. There's a clear demarcation there. But it's I don't know, dude. We're in such a cult of personality fucking ordeal.
And it's not just that, but I think what speaks to that is also the degree of brainwashing as a whole, not just in the U.S. You could say generally in the West, but particularly in the U.S. and the U.K., where people are programmed from an early age on not to actually care about foreign policy that much, which is quite ironic considering these two countries have had the largest empires in history. They spend all of their money killing and oppressing other people. So, it's not something foreign to them, but nonetheless, no pun intended. And, what I want to say with that is that people will not notice this vacuum. They go and think that they're watching honest and consistent political commentary or reporting, and 90% of it, 99% of it has nothing about what's happening abroad, what's happening, for example, AFRICOM, if you will. This is barely talked about, the Africa Command section of the U.S. military, U.S. armed forces. And, for example, what's happening in occupied Palestine, what's happening with Julian Assange, like all these really fundamentally colossal issues, which are not just an affront on the human rights of people abroad, but will very soon come home to people in the U.S. and the U.K., in the form of paramilitarized police, as we're seeing, right? This is directly benefiting the military-industrial complex and the, fascist nature of the government, and journalistic freedom soon to be completely squashed if this trial with Assange goes through. And so, I think most people, they watch all this stuff and, they're more concerned with AOC and, Bernie Sanders and all this crap than they are about really where most of the money is going, where most of the time and energy of their government is going, which is abroad. And they've been brainwashed since birth to not care about that, and when they hear about it, it's like the media has taught them to dehumanize others. So when we say, for example, Chelsea Manning uncovered 15,000 additional casualties in Iraq alone. Just this. I mean, to them, it's like they don't understand what 15,000 is. Like, it's like ants in their minds, It's really dehumanizing, and I think it speaks to the degree of brainwashing, and it's really heartbreaking. 15,000 people. This is a fucking genocide. I mean, this is akin to uncovering a mass grave. It's literally what it is. How can you not care about that? And the fact that this is not the subject of the trial that is going on now also speaks volumes to the collective consciousness and whatever quote unquote justice system we have.
And apparently their excuse for that is we can't disclose U.S. military rules of engagement in open court, so therefore we can't allow the collateral murder video. And even though you can go on like 800 different channels and watch the entire unedited collateral murder video.
Exactly. Also, I find this argument to be ridiculous because, the United States does not have the unilateral authority to declare rules of engagement. These are very clearly outlined in the Hague Convention, the numerous Geneva Conventions, the UN Charter of Human Rights. These are things that are very clear cut. You cannot massacre civilians. You cannot put even hoods on the heads of POWs. These are very clear-cut rules of engagement that have been in place for over a century now. So it's nothing to do with what the U.S. wants. It's like I hear sometimes even on progressive news channels talking about this, like, oh, well, Trump did this or they talk about some kind of military action and he didn't go through Congress first. Man, fuck what the Congress says. You don't have the right to just unilaterally decide to bomb other people or to kill people. You're not the world police. And they have a very kind of Anglo-centric imperialist view, even among these so-called progressives, and it's very concerning. But nonetheless, as you mentioned,
I don't really fuck with Matt Stoller, But Matt Stoller has never been more right than when he went on Jimmy Dore's show and called the DSA frightened authoritarian children.
He called it what?
He called the DSA progressives and the Bernie progressives a bunch of frightened authoritarian children.
Oh yeah. You know, it's look, whatever credit we want to give Bernie Sanders in terms of Medicare for all and all these nice domestic programs, when it comes to foreign policy, I mean, there's really nothing much to say there. You know,
and let's be perfectly clear about this, man. The reason that Bernie is allowed to, you know, continue to sheepdog, and the reason that AOC is allowed to continue to sheepdog is because they both made a commitment to ignore the existence of the security state, the commitment to ignore exactly how the empire operates. We've got them deferring to leadership on whether or not to support an illegal coup.
That's fucking nuts. I mean, that's so insulting. What is that? Like, you know, if I ask you about people, you know, can you imagine, for example, somebody asked AOC, are you okay with, you know, unarmed black men being gunned down in the street by police? And then could you imagine if she answered with, I defer to party leadership? What kind of a fucking response is that? What the fuck does that mean? Like, are people in Venezuela not humans to you? Do you not understand the concept of sovereignty, international norms? This is absurd. And as you just rightfully pointed out, the reason they're allowed to exist in the apparatus within the Democratic Party and within the political apparatus of Washington, D.C. is because they perpetuate a willful ignorance of the national security state and the military industrial complex and the empire itself. It's as if it does not exist. And, you know, sure, they'll use buzzwords from time to time. They'll say endless wars. I mean, the problem is not if the war is endless. It's the war itself. Okay. I mean, even one bomb is an issue, you know, but nonetheless, they act as if like, oh, under certain conditions, we still have the right to bomb other people. We still have the right to commit coups and illegal acts. No. And, you know, the other last month, if I recall correctly, AOC, for example, she put forward this, she tried to get through this ban of military advertising on Twitch. Now, look, on the surface, I agree with you. Sure, kids should not be brainwashed into joining the military. Sure. But I mean, if you're acknowledging that that's a bad thing, why don't you go further? Why aren't you talking about the subsidies that the Department of Defense gives Hollywood to make blockbuster movies like Black Hawk Down, you know, giving them helicopters and jeeps and military surplus for free? Why don't you go further? Why don't you talk about the military programs themselves? Why aren't you trying to get a ban on the fucking shadow wars in Africa? What about the bioweapons research facilities that the Pentagon is running? 25 of them all over the world. I mean, you know, why don't you touch on some real shit? You know, why don't you try and get some action done on all these inhumane sanctions that are being imposed on Syria, Iran, Venezuela that are killing people? I mean, blocking medical equipment and medicine from getting in. You know, you don't think that's a bit more pertinent than Twitch advertising? No, this is just, again, some of the bullshit, the paper thin contrasts that they try to paint between themselves and Democratic leadership and the Republican Party to try and appear as if they're anti-war, but they're actually perfectly complicit with deferring to party leadership.
We have decided to reward people for doing the literal least they can do.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself, it shows how effective, you know, 200 plus years of propaganda has been. It shows how psychologically beaten down the U.S. population has become. And
yeah, for real.
It speaks to me at least, it speaks to the need for, you know, someone to tell the fucking truth every once in a while. And it shows me how people who do tell the truth are punished for that. What happened to Cynthia McKinney is never going to happen to AOC. Like, I'll just use that as an example. The way that Cynthia McKinney was treated, and the way that she was treated after she was a congresswoman and as a Green Party presidential candidate, like that, AOC is never going to be on the receiving that. And Bernie, at least to his credit, even though it wasn't a public statement, has said, I'm concerned about my legacy and I don't want to be remembered as the next Ralph Nader. Well, okay, then shut the fuck up. Like, stop.
Get out the way,
motherfucker. Just stop playing. Like, go and fucking, you got, you know, you have enough places where you can go take a nice long comfortable nap. Go do that shit. so that we can go and do some work. Somebody just tagged me in a fucking post about Bernie Sanders, and I'm like, why the fuck would you haven't seen my show? Like, do you not know like who I am and what I did? What leave me out of that conversation because I'm just go fucking kick some shit over and like
exactly, like either shit or get off the pot, like stop sheepdogging people into this party. And I think Danny Haiphong said this on my show the other day. He said that the Democratic Party is the graveyard of all working class movements, and that's really what it is. And moreover, Bernie Sanders, if you read between the lines, it was quite obvious where he stood on foreign policy. Now, look, let's not be, let's be clear here. I think everyone was in agreement. Bernie Sanders not only was a good candidate in general compared to all the shit that's been put forward before, but he definitely had a bigger chance of beating Trump. But nonetheless, it doesn't go far enough. If you look at foreign policy, and I always said this, it's not enough. Even when talking about Palestine, for example, he would say things like he wants to condition military aid to Israel. Dude, they don't give a fuck about your military aid. You're too late, asshole. Like, it's 2020. They don't need it. They're running the show. They're the fucking experts now when it comes to cutting edge military technology. They don't need your goddamn money. Moreover, every time he'd start a sentence, he'd be like, I believe that Israel has the right to live in peace and security, comma, and Palestinians, No. Palestinians' rights, their human rights, their inalienable human rights and dignity is not contingent upon the peace and security of Israelis or anyone on this fucking planet. They're human beings, so by default they have human rights and they have the right to live in peace and dignity and have their own state. But he would always, have to add that condition beforehand. It's so telling. It's so telling that, and if you look at also Jamal Bowman, for example, this latest guy to get in an unseat Engel, I mean, in an open letter, he's just apologizing essentially for having made like some milquetoast mild ass comment about Israel. I mean, it was a correct comment. He said that I'm paraphrasing, but he said that he's not okay with the mistreatment of Palestinians. Again, that's an understatement, but they called him out for it, and he essentially apologized for it and said that he is opposed to BDS, which is the most peaceful, mundane protest that you could possibly undertake. And people are celebrating him winning his race because they don't give a fuck about foreign policy. To them, Palestinian lives don't matter. What's the difference if Engel, who works for AIPAC, is out, but then the next guy coming in still wants to shit all over Palestinians and doesn't even support the most peaceful fucking form of protest, just a boycott? I mean, are you serious here? Like, do Palestinians not factor into this equation? Do they not matter? You're paying for their fucking oppression. I think you should be concerned. You're financing the Israeli military. So it's not like this is we're not, it is reasonable to bring this up. It's not some kind of fringe issue here. No. You took out a guy from AIPAC. So the guy replacing him better not be with AIPAC, right? If that's considered an improvement. And if he's supporting the oppression of Palestinians, well, that's not a fucking upgrade for Palestinians.
No, all you did. And I keep making this point, and I'm going to keep making this point until I hear enough people using this point so that it fucking just cements itself in the public consciousness. If you have a machine that is designed to kill 99% of you, and your solution to that machine is to put a couple of shiny new parts on it every 2 to 4 years, all you're doing is prolonging the life of a machine designed to kill you. And that's exactly what Jamal Bowman represents. That's exactly what AOC represents. It's exactly what, trying to formulate an oppositional party that is just marginally to the left of the Bernie Sanders campaign, which was a giant fucking sheepdog psyop in the fucking first place.
Yeah, it was.
That's what that is. And oh, God damn it, dude.
They're fueling it. They're definitely fueling it. As you said, they're just putting shiny parts on it.
I just want a new machine.
Exactly. One that does not oppress and kill people. Is that too much to ask? The thing is that I never understood why people anchor themselves and handcuff themselves to the Democratic Party. Like, if look, man, you're running diametrically opposed to this fucking party. I mean, they've stated year in and year out. And once again, the most recent example was the DNC platform committee, right? Where they once again further solidified the fuck you to the working class, where they said, we are not going to support Medicare for all. We are not going to condition aid to Israel. Like, they won't even use the word occupation. That was taken out, just like a further solidification, a cementing of the fuck you to everyone. And why would you handcuff yourself to a party like that? This makes no sense. What do you like? You think you're Rambo? You're going to walk in and change it? No, they will change you. And that's always been the case. That's what FDR did to the socialists and communists and the working class movements, the CIO and unionists back in the 30s, and it's what's happening again now. You cannot go into this party and change it; it will change you. And just participating in this charade is essentially helping to perpetuate this oppression, and abroad and domestically. You're not doing anyone any favors with that. Really not.
What they're doing is making an investment in long-term grifting. There is no other voting bloc that is as frequently gullible yet determinedly hopeful as the progressive element in this country. And they're so ripe for the plucking that all it takes is someone going out and repeating 40-year-old talking points or 60-year-old talking points about really fucking obvious shit that everyone knows and everyone has figured out. But as long as you say it like it was an epiphany, people will be like, oh, here, let me support your fucking GoFundMe or your Patreon or whatever. And you're fucking throwing that truth down and shit like that. And then you're like, hey, but, and they're like, shut the fuck up. You're going to hurt the party. You're going to hurt the movement. Yeah. You're going to damage the movement if you tell the truth about this fucking piece of shit over here. Like,
I love that, right? The left eating its own. Motherfucker, you're not on the left. You're a right winger. Like, you're supporting a right wing party. That's the whole issue. That's why we're angry. That's what we're trying to bring up here. You're not supporting a left wing party. It's masquerading itself as a working class movement, but it's actually been co-opted and working on behalf of the establishment. And you're hurting the party. It's such a funny line, man. Fuck the party. That's the point.
If you ever get a chance, you should read a book called Finks by Joel Whitney. It's the subtitle is How the CIA Tricked the World's Best Journalists. And it really goes into the history of the CIA, not just co-opting progressive or left movements, but starting them. Like there was a particular leftist conference that was taking place in Paris in like 49, and the CIA was running around freaking out about it because it wasn't theirs.
Oh, yeah. So, that plays into their counterintelligence programs and endeavors, right? So, sometimes they'll create them themselves if they don't have them already co-opted, right? So you've seen this throughout the Cold War when it came to black rights movements, civil rights movements, anything remotely Marxist or socialist or pro-worker. Even feminist groups, and you'd have Hollywood actors and actresses, and anyone who was a public figure who spoke out against the official narrative being targeted and blackmailed.
Like Gloria Steinem was bragging in an interview in the 90s about how she worked for the CIA when she was developing that wave of feminism. I give all the credit to the world to Boots Riley for this because he was the one that first pointed it out to me. But like when you've got feminist icons that are on the active payroll of the CIA, maybe it's time to admit to ourselves collectively that looking to protected classes to find our agency ain't gonna fucking happen.
Right. Right. They have no interest whatsoever in altering the status quo in any capacity. And it's quite striking. And this once again speaks to the degree of conditioning that, for example, just looking at the Democratic Party, how they refuse to budge 1 inch on any fucking issue. Not one concession has been remotely accommodated to from the progressive or Bernie Sanders wing. And nonetheless, people, they just buy into the whole game and they drink the Kool-Aid and they just keep on going, right? It's like they have this blind hope that something is going to work by continuing to support this party, even though they keep giving them middle fingers. They think that, this political class in Washington, D.C., because they speak in a in a new way compared to the leadership, and they're young and hip and cool, and they're also people of color, that they can be trusted. Well, pay attention, read between the lines. They're not always your best friends, and I think people made this mistake with Obama in 2008. He talked about ending the wars and mass surveillance and closing Guantanamo and all this shit. And then he gets in office and fills his cabinet with Citigroup and Wall Street and Big Pharma, and ramps up the wars. And, Big Pharma stock goes up 3 times. And people are making the same mistake again now. They think that, oh, well, we got all these new figures coming in, Jamal Bowman, AOC. We got to expand the squad, whatever the fuck that means. Dude, they're not on your side.
More intersectional fascism. Woo!
I don't care what color the oppressors are. If they're oppressing us, that's not in our interest, is it? And this is domestic and worldwide. It applies all across the spectrum. It really does.
I couldn't agree more, man. I've had to pee for like the last 45 minutes. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap the interview for here. We Action for Assange is gonna be back later. We're trying to figure out what our nighttime action is going to be this evening. So we'll be back in several hours. But I can't thank you enough for being on the show, man. Hopefully you come back. We'll have our other host with us.
With pleasure. And can I just say, I really respect the work that you guys are doing. It's not just a question of admirable and noble. It's fucking necessary. I mean, alarm bells should be going off in people's heads right now, and so I thank you for what you're doing. I thank you for fighting on Julian Assange's behalf when no one else is, and also for holding independent media accountable, especially, and just getting this out there, because if they don't do their fucking jobs, I mean, who will, right? So yeah. I really thank you for all your collective work and all of your actions and everything. It's really necessary. So, and of course, for having me on. Thank you for giving me this time to speak. It was really awesome. I love connecting with other real fucking leftists. You know what I'm saying? Like having a conversation on the same wavelength and not having
I definitely want to get you on my other show here soon, and we can
by all means
really fucking we can let loose. I'm a little bit more reserved on this channel than I am on not much, because I'm the same fucking dude, but like there are places that I'm like, oh, maybe pump the brakes on that. Don't hit them with the Luciferian pedophiles on this show. But no, man. We'll pick this up. Please tell people where they can find you and how to subscribe to your shit. And yeah, thank you again, man. I really do appreciate it.
Of course, my pleasure. So you can find me at youtube.com/Richard Medhurst. You can also find me at rockfin.com/Richard Medhurst. And that's really important because, it's quickly growing to be an alternative to YouTube, which I think is important with all this crap from big tech. So you have Jimmy Dore over there, Graham Elwood, a bunch of leftists. We're already slowly migrating, and you can find everything I do there. So, definitely rockfin.com/Richard Medhurst. And on Twitter, just type Richard Medhurst in the search bar. You'll find me. So my handle is at Richie, RICHI, Medhurst. That's about it.
And on behalf of Andrew Smith and Misty Winston and Kendra Christian, I am Steve Poikonen. I host another show called Slow News Day. You can find it by typing in Slow News Day Podcast into your YouTube search bar. I'm also on Rockfin and D Live. I would prefer that you watch me there, but that would mean I would have to start putting content on there again. And I don't have the logins on this laptop. So I had to evacuate my house like 2 weeks before I got on the plane to come here. I don't know if I mentioned any of that to you, Richard, but I live in one of the many parts of California that has been on fire for the last month. And we were seriously like in the middle of a Tuesday night vigil, and I get the evac order like live on camera, and I'm like, oh shit, I guess I gotta go now. So I haven't even been back to my house yet. I went to Murder Mountain for a week, and then I went down by like Big Sur, Monterey Bay area, and then got on a plane and came here, and I've been here since Thursday doing this non-fucking stop. So I'll eventually be able to get some sleep. But until then, holy shit, good luck to us all.